Okay, so this mini lesson is going to look at a couple of sample literature reviews because my goal here is to demonstrate for you guys a couple of moves that will be helpful to you as you both seek to organize your entire literature review, sort of on a macro level, and as you think about how to integrate your sources and organize within a particular paragraph or all of your paragraphs, as the case may be. So you'll see that this document, the sample literature reviews document, is linked in this week's overview page. It's just a Word doc, so hopefully that is accessible for everybody, but let me know if you need me to send you a different copy. In this collection, I really just have two sample literature reviews, and spoiler alert, they're both literature reviews that I have composed either by myself or with a team of fellow scholars. So one of the things that I'm going to show you guys in sample literature review number 1 is how the organization is set up sort of whole cloth. This is a shorter literature review, so it'll be a little bit easier to kind of get the big picture from this one. And then as we move down, sample literature review 2, I want to talk a little bit more about some of those fine-grained details of how sources are integrated. Okay, so first of all, sample literature review 1 can show us a couple of big picture moves. First is that we talked about this before, but you want your literature review to go in that funnel shape from broad to more and more and more and more specific. So here, this is a literature review about learning communities, like the composition learning community, or CLC, which you'll see mentioned here. The very first sentence shows us a couple of things. First of all, it's going to dive right in to the direct topic that we're discussing. One of the key goals for the CLC is sustaining learning community practices that support knowledge transfer. Now, that's a broad statement about the key topic of this literature review, but there's no hemming and hawing. I'm not talking about how learning is fundamental for all people and education has always been in need of different ways to support students. No, we're not doing any of that. We're not gearing up for a running start. We're just going to jump right in, and you'll notice that it's so direct and connected to what we want to talk about that we are citing this very first sentence. So we're jumping right in. And then we're kind of connecting it to the local context or our particular discourse community that's locally situated at Wayne State. So here, for those of you who have been wondering, like, what does it mean? Why is this asking for my personal connection? What is the benefit of this study to me? That means less than you think it would about your personal experience, and it really has more to do with you as researcher. How does this whole body of literature affect your particular study? Okay? And that's what's happening here. We're making direct connection between our research and the literature. And we kind of start to pose our research question here. Now, this is a pretty, like I said, this is a tight, economical first paragraph. Your first paragraph might have a few more background sentences. It might look more like these two paragraphs combined, but you don't want to gear up for a running start. You want to jump right into what your actual literature is actually about. And when you connect it to self, quote unquote, you want to connect it to yourself as researcher, not yourself as a person necessarily, if that makes sense. Okay, so as we go on, you'll see that this next paragraph has no citations in it whatsoever, because here we again are giving background information that's connected to our local context and what we have done personally at Wayne State University in this area. So we take a couple of paragraphs to talk about that, and then we jump into more literature. And I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, is that we set it up in the sentence before by talking about something that is needed. And then we continue on. Our first sentence in this paragraph talks about what Carter and Gallegos in 2017 argue. What's their main point? And then again, we connect it back to our work. Now here is another connection, but this is a different source that's being cited here. Now I'm going to get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But one of the things I wanted you to see here is that it's totally possible to include two different sources within a single paragraph. And in fact, you'll notice that there is no such phrase of in my first source, in my second source. We're not doing that. That's a move that's not really seen in scholarly literature reviews. So if you are going to say what the main argument of a source is, you want to talk about the scholars themselves and what they have to say. Don't talk about a disembodied source. That's not really how we talk about each other as people, and that's not how scholars talk about each other. We use names. We think of each other as people who are writing arguments. We don't think of each other as sources to be used, if that makes sense. Okay, so now after we've given some background knowledge, we jump into some of the sources that are connected to this part of the research. We take a paragraph to talk about what is missing mixed methods approaches. We take this next paragraph to talk about digital and visual modalities. So again, we're returning to Charlton. We include Blau and Chambers-Inbal here. And Ballantine, we have several different sources here because what we're talking about is a multimodal approach to this assessment. Now we're going to zoom in on audio modalities. And again, here there's a couple different sources. Secularis and Bassett here. And then here towards the end, this is where we're getting to the gap. So you'll notice a flow. We've got our background information, connection to our context, our local context. We start here with the broad arguments about mixed method assessment. In the next paragraph, we talk specifically about digital, visual, and audio modalities for assessment. In this next paragraph, we talk about audio modalities specifically. So do you see how we're getting narrower and narrower? And then we are going to talk about the gap. The use of multimodal assessment methods to understand student voice as both evidence of engagement and as a literal vocal utterance has been scarce. So all of the sources that you've seen so far are basically all that's out there, and that's not enough, right? That's what we're arguing here. We're going to argue what we did is going to fill the gap. We deployed audio recordings of student-to-student interviews to demonstrate how student voice can be captured to assess engagement with learning community courses, as well as with a physical writing event. Bam. Okay, so I'm going to move along here, but if you have questions about that, definitely shoot me an email. We can totally talk about it. All right, now that's broad strokes, getting that funnel structure in place, paragraph by paragraph, leading down to how your study or your argument is going to speak back to that literature. How is it going to fill the gap? Now, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. I've talked to some of you in our conferences about how you are the boss of your sources. Your sources are not the boss of you. And we just mentioned a second ago how you do not want to make the move of my first source says and then my second source says, because not only is that going to get cumbersome, but it's also going to get repetitive and it's kind of a student move. So what I'm trying to do is prep you guys to kind of shed some of those layers so that you can be presenting your thoughts in a scholarly fashion that will be recognizable within the discourse community that you're working in. Okay, so first things first, lead with your ideas in the order you want to address them. Pull in whatever sources apply. Okay? For example, in this first section, we're talking about reflection, metacognition, and transfer. So we're going to talk about two separate scholars in this first sentence. And then what I did here, and I'm writing this literature review for a committee that I was working on, so I'm using we because it was a group of us. We also maintain the distinction between reflection and reflective writing as two discrete actions. Now check this out. All right, we talked about Moon and Yancey up here, and here we have Moon, Yancey, and the title of Yancey's particular book because she's written like 1,000. Then we're going to continue on going. And one of the things I want to show you is that as we're talking about reflection and how reflection is different from reflective writing in this paragraph, there's this sentence, right? So I'm writing here, in a very specific way, reflection can happen during writing in response to a specific prompt designed to kickstart or continue thought processes in order to sort through existing knowledge or to gain new perspectives. Now, in addition to citing Moon and Yancey, there's Jenkins and Trimble. So you'll know that there are solidly 4 separate people, scholars, that are being cited because, check this out, all of this writing is my thoughts. I'm using these sources to support what I want to say. Not the other way around. I'm not chasing after these sources, trying to parrot back what they are saying. You don't need to do that. If your readers want to know what Moon or Yancey said, they'll go read Moon or Yancey. You don't have to restate it in such detail that it's almost like you're rereading it. What you do need to do is show how the sources support what you want to say. Let me show you another example. Okay, let me find a good one here. Do we want this Beaufort one? Yeah, okay. So here, we're going to have a whole paragraph about defining and articulating reflective writing and metacognition. So I'm continuing the thought here, using furthermore as a connective transition word. Again, based on that first sentence, I can draw on several sources that all connect to that. So then I don't need to talk about Downes and Wardle, and then a whole nother paragraph for Yancey, and then a whole nother paragraph for another one of Yancey's pieces. Right? I put them all here following one broad statement. In the next sentence, I'm going to add on to that. So it's almost like the equivalent of, how in improv they say, never say no, you always say yes and. That's what we're doing here. We're going to talk about something that relates to 3 sources, and then we're going to say yes and let's talk about Beaufort as well. And we're going to briefly connect Beaufort, add a little quotation here. And then we're going to circle back to Downes and Wardle. And then we're going to conclude on with a counter argument. So, okay, here's what Beaufort says, Downes and Wardle and Yancey, they all agree. However, so do you see how I'm using transition words here? We've got furthermore up here, continuing on from the previous paragraph, arguing about what all these authors say about metacognition and transfer. However, it has yet to be proven that such awareness alone will transfer beyond course or student in the performance of writing. So we got our new citation here. Moreover, beyond, so I'm sorry guys, there are a lot of transition words in this paragraph, but we're kind of rolling a bunch of stuff together. Moreover, beyond assessing awareness and metacognition, the role of reflection in improving the narrow genre of reflective writing does not account for the application of abstract concepts in new writing situations. This whole sentence is my lead out from the Cutney, and we're going to continue that lead out. And I just want to show you guys, as a writer, all of these sentences are from my brain. And that's the kind of ratio you want. You want the preponderance of your writing to be what is happening in your brain and how you're leading readers through these sources. The sources aren't leading your readers. You are the writer, guiding them through your ideas that are supported in really key ways by readings in the field. And you'll notice this is in MLA style. This one up here, you'll notice. Oh no, that's also in MLA. All right, well, that is that. As you continue to read through these, I'm sorry, I've been scrolling up and down. I hope nobody got too dizzy. As you read carefully through these two literature review samples, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email if you have a question about any of this stuff. Or, of course, you can talk to your peer mentors to get more clarity on both organizing your whole literature review paragraph by paragraph or creating organization within your paragraphs as you use your sources to create support for your argument.